Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. In this week's Parashat Chukat, there's a lot of discussion about what exactly was the sin of Moshe and Aharon and Mei Meriva that caused it to be that Hashem said, that's it, you're not going into Eretz Canaan. Shadal writes that there's actually 13 different interpretations that he found. The Barbanel quotes 10 different Perushim. Shadal writes that he's afraid to even come up with a new interpretation, lest he sin himself in doing so and coming up with a Perush that's maybe not correct. And some of the more well-known Perushim are Rashi quoting Chazal that what they did was that they hit the rock when they were supposed to speak to the rock. The Rambam talks about the sin of getting angry when they say, when Moshe says, Shim'una ha-morim, and the Ramban, quoting Rabbeinu Hananel, talks about this statement that makes it seem as if they were making water come out, mikochot atzmam, that they say, Hamin hasela hazeh notzi lechem mayim, that it's as if we're doing it as opposed to stressing the role of Hashem in creating this miracle so that water comes out. But what I actually want to do is to focus on the final answer of the 10 that the Abravanel brings. And he quotes a Chacham Echad that he had heard from, that basically that there was no sin. That there's not a specific chet that Moshe and Aharon do. It's not a chet at all. The reason that he suggests this as a possible interpretation are that he says it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say that Moshe Rabbeinu would go ahead and sin, right? We normally speak about Moshe Rabbeinu making mistakes and sinning, especially at this later stage in life. It defies logic. That's number one. And number two is that later on in the Chumash, when Hashem tells Moshe that he's not going to be going into Eretz Canaan, it's true that at that point he does mention the events of Mei Meriva, but there are times that it's not mentioned. For example, the beginning of Parashat Ve'etchanan, when Moshe says Vayitaber Hashem bi lema'anchem v'lo shema elai, and Hashem says, you're not going into Eretz Canaan, stop speaking to me, Ravlach, but he doesn't mention a reason because of the fact that you sinned at Mei Meriva. The main challenge of this interpretation is that it very much seems like from the Psukim that Moshe and Aharon sinned. Right? Hashem criticizes them quite strongly here for what it was that they did. Vayomer Hashem Moshe v'Aharon Ya'an lo ha'emantem bi la'agdisheni le'nei bnei Yisrael l'chein lo taviu et hakal hazeh la'aretz asher natati lehem, etc. Right? You didn't believe in me, and this is repeated elsewhere as well. So it seems like they did something wrong. But this Chacham, the way that he deals with this possibility is he says that Moshe and Aharon are actually included in the sin of Klal Yisrael. He points out other places where this is true, that it's not that Moshe and Aharon were the ones who were doing this chet, but rather it was a general chet of Bnei Yisrael, that they did not believe in Hashem. And since Moshe and Aharon were there also, so they're included in that description. But in truth, according to him, there was no sin that Moshe and Aharon actually did. But so then the question is why, right? Well, then, therefore, what's the connection? Why do they not end up being zoche to go into Eretz Canaan? And an interpretation that he mentions and others have mentioned over the years is that it's really a direct cause of Moshe being the leader of the Dor Hamidbar, that he needs to stay behind with them either as part of their punishment as a result of Chet HaMeraglim, that he needs to stay with them as well, or that perhaps that's part of the job of the leader is to stay behind with his followers, even if perhaps he would be zochet to go into Eretz Canaan based off of his own merits, but part of his tafkid as their leader is to stay with them. But what I wanted to do is actually suggest a slightly, or to take it really a step further. That Chazal and many of the Mefarshim point out that in Mei Meriva, what happens right before is that now it's the new generation. That the Dor Hamidbar has died out, and now this is the generation, this is the group of people that's going into Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan. And the role of a leader, in many ways, is to try and notice what's going on in terms of a specific pattern of behavior, in terms of a dynamic, and if it's one that's not healthy, to try and get the people to snap out of it, get them to shake out of it, get like sort of this paradigm shift, to look at things differently. And when the transition goes from the Dor HaMidbar to Dor HaNichnas La'aretz, we would expect that things are going to be different. And yet their complaint is very reminiscent of previous complaints of Bnei Yisrael over the course of the Midbar. And it could be that that's part of what's standing behind Chazal and Rashi's interpretation, that Moshe and Aaron are supposed to speak to the rock instead of hit it, to emphasize this change that has taken place over the years. But really what it is that part of Moshe's job at this stage is to try and get Bnei Yisrael to get out of the pattern. And he's not able to. That they're going over the same types of complaints that they've been doing for the last 40 years. And perhaps that could be a reason, not to say that it's a sin of Moshe specifically, but rather to say that Moshe is not able at this stage to get Bnei Yisrael out of this stuck pattern of behavior. And I think that that's something that's very relevant to our stage as well. That there are many ways in which we or our communities, we may feel stuck in this dynamic, stuck in this pattern where we're going through a lot of change in terms of health situation, in terms of here in Israel, the political situation. And perhaps what our job, what the job of our leaders is to try and think of ways that we can get out of this pattern, way that we can get into a more healthy way that we can relate to each other and be'ezrat Hashem to Hashem as well. I hope that we're able to do that, to think of ways that we can rethink how we've been doing things, and be'ezrat Hashem be zoche, if we need to make any changes, to go ahead and do them. Shabbat Shalom.